Altec. I am a Central Territory Sales Director. I, as well as Igor Cross, who's joining me today, our sales engineer, will be presenting a presentation on DocLink, and we're going to be talking about document management and process automation. Before we get started, I do want to say if there are any questions, you could use the chat box. We'll do our best to address those at the end of the presentation, or as time allows, maybe during as well. But really what we're going to be doing, again, is we're going to be walking through this presentation of document management and the business process automation. So to set the tone, I want to share a quick story with you. So the other day, I was flipping through the channels and I stopped on ESPN and I was watching SportsCenter. And I had a feeling some of you would appreciate this. Really what was going on was the Toronto Raptors, excuse me, my mouse wasn't working there. The Toronto Raptors, they were talking about it. It was a segment, and the segment was basically describing how they were surprised that the Toronto Raptors were doing so well this year, given the fact that they lost Kawhi Leonard, the best player in basketball, to free agency. And one of the analysts pointed out, well, the reason why they're doing so good this year, despite losing the best player in basketball, is they've taken on this trend. And a lot of businesses have taken on this trend, whether it's a sports-based organization, whether it's a bank, etc., right? They've all taken on the trend of digital transformation, right? It's happening. It is something that is going on day in and day out. And the folks that are jumping on board with that are winning, right? And so in this case, what they were talking about for the Toronto Raptors is they were talking about the fact that they knew that they were going to lose Kawhi Leonard. They gave it their best effort to re-sign him. He moved on to another organization. And so what they did is they actually built a state-of-the-art infrastructure to find players to fit the best 5 players on a court. And they did this through data, and they did this through analytics. They compiled everything, and they put it in one neat place for them to look at it, right? So this is their facility. That I did a little research, and I found out this is their facility. All this information, data on players, skill sets, what they're good at, their shooting percentages, things like that, they can find in a matter of minutes through a few clicks of a button. So what they did is they found all this information, they compiled it, they made this state-of-the-art center, so they have all this information at their fingertips. And now when opponents come into to play them, or they are on the road and they're playing a different opponent, they know what matchups are the best because they have all this information, again, at the center. With a couple clicks of a button, they can find everything they need. And so that's where it relates to document management. And this is where it relates to business as a whole. Again, we're not talking about professional sports. We're talking about any type of business, any type of vertical. They all have some sort of pain, right? If you're living in a mundane paper-based world, you don't have that information at a few clicks of a button. So you're not winning, right? And that's what we want to achieve. Just like the Toronto Raptors have started to achieve. They're winning without the best player in basketball, but that's because they have the data, the analytics to produce a solid team to go out there every night and put up a fight. And that's why they're currently in second place in the East, right? So they have all this information here just simply, and they can use it. So that's what we want to talk about. So we want to talk about automation for a win, right? When it comes to accounts payable, you can see here, just looking at these metrics, you could see that if you automate, you're winning. You're winning by saving money. You're winning by keeping your AP clerks and your accounting department happy, right? When everybody's winning and everything's clicking on all cylinders, work doesn't become work. It actually becomes a little more fun, right? And so I understand we're not going out there and playing for a championship, right? But at the end of the day, we are trying to create some small wins within the organization to make everybody's life easier, to make the company successful. And if you're not jumping on this trend of digital transformation, just like the Toronto Raptors, you're probably not winning. Your company's probably a little mundane, and you're not taking advantage of some tools out there, such as DocLink, that can help you create these wins. And today we'll talk a little bit about, what DocLink is, So we'll talk about what DocLink is. We're going to jump into a demonstration portion, and that is going to be around AP. So we're going to start in AP because 9 times out of 10, that is low-hanging fruit. So we'll talk about purchase orders, invoice capture with OCR, and we're going to talk about workflow and integration. So once those documents have been captured or created, we'll know what we can do with those, and we'll talk about the integration into Sage itself. I want to touch on some customer success, as well as what we can do to extend DocLink beyond AR, right? I think a lot of times we get pegged as an AP-only solution, which we're not, but we play nice there. So we generally will start there because that's low-hanging fruit for, I think, everybody involved. So let's talk about what DocLink is, right? So at its core, DocLink is a standalone repository. So as I mentioned, that data where the Raptors needed to have a single point access to see everything with a few clicks of a button, this is what we would be using internally, and this is what you would be using DocLink, right? So this is going to be your centralized repository. All the data that comes into this repository will be able to be searched and retrieved by, but we have to capture that data first. So when that data gets captured moving left to right, when that data gets captured, it's being brought into the repository, which is the DocLink symbol here, but we capture that through various ways. We have abilities to scan, we have OCR, which we'll touch on, we have print captures, we have emails, barcodes, etc., right? So we can pretty much capture any type of document that comes into the organization or that's created and bring it into the centralized repository. Now, with the centralized repository, when a document comes into the organization or as it's created, there's generally some type of business process that goes behind that, right? Whether it's maybe an AP invoice that needs to be routed around for approval or coding by an approving manager, right? So there's that type of scenario, or maybe it's an AR type scenario where you want to send documents out. Well, I know you could do that directly from the ERP, but what we can do is we can actually set this up in an automated fashion, and we could package documents up and have those sent out in a timely manner, right? So maybe you want them to go out every day or every Friday at the end of the week. You want all the invoices to go out to your customers or vendors, right? With supplemental documentation attached to that. That's where we differ there. But going back to the process of workflows and things like that, maybe it's HR onboarding and you want to, route a document around, a resume around for people to view and see, and you store it in your repository as well. We have automated routing as well. So we could dictate certain things. So we can see a dollar amount on an invoice, say it's $5,000, it's brought into DocLink. We know that automatically has to go to, we'll say, the controller or CFO for approval because it's over a certain dollar amount threshold. DocLink can determine and use that automated workflow to send that invoice directly to that CFO, right, for he or she's approval. We also have the ability to create documents within DocLink, right? So we have the ability to use what we call smart forms to create a configurable window within DocLink. That allows you to get rid of any paper-based forms. So, Excel worksheets, maybe purchase requisitions, things like that, that are paper-based, we can get rid of those. And all the while we're doing all this business process within DocLink, we're constantly communicating with Sage. We're constantly pinging Sage and getting vendor code, vendor information, things like that, because that is going to be your accounting system of record. So we're going to rely on that data in there. We're not trying to replace that by any means. We want to build upon your initial investment, and that's the ERP. We're just making it stronger by adding these robust workflows and things like that. And again, lastly, the retrieval portion, right? You can log in and you can retrieve documents from anywhere you are basically today, because we do have a web application where you can log into, a web client. We have a desktop application, and we also have a mobile app as well. A mobile app's a little more limited, but the idea here is you can still log into that mobile app, search and retrieve documents, do approvals, etc. Right? So this is what DocLink is, the ability to capture, to store, to allow for business process automation to take place, retrieval, and then the two-way communication between the ERP, again, building upon your investment. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to pass this over to Igor. Igor is going to walk through a demonstration of the product, and then when he's done with that, we'll circle back and talk about some of those customer successes. So Igor, I will hand it over to you now.
Perfect. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for such a nice intro. So let me share my screen and we'll start rolling through the product presentation. So what you can see on the screen right now, this is a typical Sage 300 interface, and this is where the journey is going to start. And we're going to focus today specifically on accounts payable, process PO and non-PO, and components that are associated with that. So the integration portion, we would like to demonstrate and start from actually selecting and showing you how we can integrate with the purchase order process. Because when you would create a purchase order, this is where the journey for reception of invoices technically is going to start for us. So what we're going to do, I'm going to open my purchase order screen, and this is where the integration mode would start in a nutshell immediately. So the purchase order screen allows us, of course, to create purchase orders and then distribute them. So what DocLink can do in this interface, so let us select a purchase order that we're going to use for the demonstration today. And a couple of things can happen immediately from this screen. Let's say you created this specific purchase order, and now you would like to automatically distribute that purchase order as well as store that document in the document management depository. The only thing you need to do to achieve both of these two goals is to click post and then print. So that's the first step to onboard the document into DocLink, and DocLink is going to distribute that via email to a vendor. And we will look at the example how the distributed email looks like a little bit later today during the presentation as well. So when the document is stored, when we onboarded the purchase order in this manner, now we can later conduct checks. For example, compare invoice or a packing slip to the purchase order that we have just printed and onboarded to DocLink. On the packing slip side, we can receive, and on the invoice side, when we onboarded the purchase order and when we received the packing slip, we can later conduct a three-way match and other kinds of matches to the document. So let's look how that will look like. So what we have completed so far, we created a purchase order in Sage, we posted and printed it, and that created us a record in DocLink, and separately it sent an order to our vendor, and we distributed that order to a vendor via email. Now, when that happens, a couple of documents are going to come in for us. First one is going to be a packing slip, and I have it right here. When we get a packing slip and you conducting a reception, we can onboard the packing slip in DocLink and either just keep it there for the reference purposes, or we can actually push it through the shipping workflow. So how can we do that? When the packing slip, like in our example, is received as a paper document, and I'm replicating paper document reception by having a file available. So effectively, when you get a paper document in a package with your invoice, you would have somebody take in that packing slip, put it in the hopper of a scanner, and hit in a scan button. That will effectively land document in a folder, and I'll do that right now. So copy that image and put it in the folder on the right-hand side right there. So this is the folder from where we are registering incoming packing slips, right? And that's of course done automatically by the fact that you are printing the by the fact that you're scanning, the document from your scanner into a folder. And scanners are of course automatically configured to do that. Now, another thing that's going to occur when you get in the next set of documents, you're going to get a PO invoice associated with it. And it can be on paper, perhaps you're getting them on paper as well, or maybe it's going to be received via email. And this is where another power of the solution comes into play. If you receive documents via email, let's say your suppliers are sending you an email with attached invoice like I have it right here, all we need to do is to configure an email, for example, invoices@myaltec.com, to be monitored for incoming transactions, and every single invoice sent to that email address is going to be automatically onboarded and brought into your workflow. This means that service is doing the work for you and users are not engaged in the process of document registration. And this is tremendous saving of time, especially if you have thousands of invoices to register and process. Now, if you still get documents in paper, what we are going to do, I'm going to demonstrate you how we register from a folder as well when you get documents in paper and you scan them in. And in this example, we are going to register at the same time PO and non-PO invoice. And what they're going to demonstrate for you is how the system can automatically distinguish between those documents, but not only distinguish between them, but also identify vendors, apply business rules, and potentially catch any kind of business rule violations. So to start that process, I will also copy these images and put them in another folder, which is below that, which is designated for registration for invoices that we receive. And as you can see, they have been already picked up by the service. Now, when we register documents, we need to onboard our packing slip. Interface you can see on the screen right now, and we'll come back to that one later as well, is DocLink Smart Client, where all documents are stored and are accessible for search, retrieve, and workflow function. But right now, we're interested in indexing a batch and specifically the packing slip that is waiting in a folder for us, because before we can apply business rules to an invoice that is associated with a PO, we need to also grab the data and onboard the packing slip. So let's do that. I'm going to hit index batch, and we are interested in our inbound packing slips right here. And as you can see, I have multiple folders associated with different document types, and this is another level of automation that system can also provide, not only for incoming invoices or packing slip, but for any other document type of your choice to take documents from these folders or email addresses, as you've seen earlier, and place them in workflows associated with such processes. Now, let's onboard the packing slip. So I'm going to open that. What happens now, we have a packing slip associated with the PO. So this is our PO right there and the details about it. And a couple of things we need to do. So immediately we have document type selected. This is AP packing slip. If we would like, we can automatically place it in the workflow, the shipping workflow right there. So in that case, we'll be able to actively receive items. It means that we're going to be able to compare items on the PO versus items that we actually getting on the document, quantities and items themselves. In this example, we need to onboard this image first. And what's the easiest method to onboard a packing slip when we already have a purchase order? Precisely right, is to use a purchase order number to look up the information in the Sage database. You can populate the PO number via lookup if you would click on the square to the right from the property field right there. If you click on the square, and I'll show that to you in just a second, we'll be able to look up and find the PO. Or you can use a tool, it's called Capture the Area, where you can lasso the value from the image right here. So we'll be able to lasso the value and populate the field with the value from the image itself. Or you can use traditional keying from the image method. Which one you use is up to you, but a variety of tools available, they provide an opportunity for different users to achieve the personal level of convenience to operate in a way that is convenient and known and kind of used to specifically for them. So let's look at the lookup. I'm going to hit the square to the right from the field. And this is the lookup into our Sage interface, and we can see all existing purchase order in the system. And we can easily find the one that we're interested in, and this is the purchase order 11 right there on the bottom. At the same time, we can actually filter by the number as well. So for example, maybe you know that the purchase order actually starts or contains a specific number, let's say 11 or 13, but you don't know the rest of the values, but you know the vendor name. You can initiate the filter based on the PO number or other properties. But in our case, we identified the vendor, so we can select the PO like that. As you can see, immediately when we assign the purchase order number to a packing slip, entire line of details is now associated as list of properties with this document. And this document, as well as the PO, is searchable and retrievable, and of course, can be linked to other documents based on common properties. And all of these are potentially common properties between documents. This means that later on, and we'll also demonstrate that to you later today, if we search for all documents associated with a specific purchase order number, we will be able to retrieve our purchase order, potential our purchase requisition, our packing slip, our invoices, everything. So we saved that, so I'll hit save, and now the document is ready to go. It has been sent to a shipping workflow. What happens next is the capture, and we are going to process the capture using optical character recognition technology. And this is also an extremely powerful tool that will substantially reduce the amount of entry that you would do with documents that you receive, because everybody would like to be as efficient as possible. And when you receive invoices, very often you need to key this information in manually, maybe more than once. And applying the optical character recognition technology to this process will substantially reduce this effort. So I'm going to open the next part of our product here, and this is called our verification interface. So first I will quickly refresh the list so we can see all documents that we received. And as you remember, earlier we have submitted 2 documents into the process. One of them was a PO invoice and another one was non-PO. System, we have 2 documents from today right there, and they have been separated into 2 separate documents as a batch, 2 separate batches, because one of them is a PO invoice and another one is non-PO. And some of you probably already guessed how that happened, and we'll have a look at that in just a second. So let me open the very first document we have on the list, the batch number 244. So separation between these document types occurs very simply. We know what's the difference between PO and non-PO invoice. First of all, it's the presence of the PO line item details. But in addition to that, very key important identifier is missing on non-PO invoices, and that is, of course, our PO number. By the fact of absence of the PO number, we can distinguish between one document or the other. Some of you may ask, maybe something was not recognized properly and perhaps we need to reassign this. Maybe this is indeed a PO invoice and we need to make this change. Is it available? Is this option provided in your environment? And the answer is absolutely yes. Users can at their discretion change profiles to whatever profiles you're working with. So the system is flexible enough to allow you editing at any point within this process. Now, let's have a look at what the environment does for you in a nutshell. First of all, as you can see, out of the box, we are scraping off the image all the information that we're interested for us with regards to the invoice that we submitted for a specifically non-PO process. Standard header and footer details, such as we've taken the phone number and identified the vendor, or maybe we would take the vendor name and identify the vendor ID. It can go one way or the other as a cascading rule. We looked into the database and determined, based on the vendor ID, that this invoice doesn't exist yet, as well as we scraped off the image every other piece of information, such as invoice date. And as you can see, when I select the field, we can clearly see where the data came from right there. And the same happens with every other field. Let's say if I select the invoice number, subtotal, tax, freight, and total, right? So we are pulling all this information off the image automatically. Now, maybe you need to add additional fields, and reasonable question will be how customizable is the extraction schema, what we can add, or maybe this is a fixed set. The answer is you can add or remove any fields of your choice. If that's what you would like, you can add, let's say, delivery date, maybe bill to ship to information and things like that. If you need to make changes, you can also utilize, same as I explained in the DocLink interface, options of lassoing the values and pointing and click. And let me show you that on an example of a due date that is missing from our document right here. So we have due date right there, and the due date values, of course, on the image on the other side. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to select the due date field right there. And when I move my mouse to the right, as you can see, a couple of things happen. First of all, below the cursor, I have a message indicating what field I'm looking for right now. Below that, as soon as I point to a value, we can see what value I'm pointing to. So whatever that is, let's say point to the invoice number there. And this is what we call point and click. And that can be applied to table details when you can lasso entire columns. or just the due date as we can see here. So I can point and click on the due date, and as you can see, presto, it is populated into the field of our choice. Very neat and very fast to edit or add in additional values, or maybe reassign some of the values, right? Let's say tax or freight or total, things like that. And pretty much when we see documents, we extract the data and they're ready to be exported. Very important thing about this interface, because some of you probably already maybe type in the questions and answer section. If, as in your example, everything is extracted, do I need to see this document? Or maybe we can just send good documents that are compliant with business rules directly to document management for coding and approval, right? So can you do that? And the answer is absolutely yes. This interface exists to handle exceptions. We're showing you the interface so you know how it looks like and feels. In the real life environment, this document would have never landed here because everything is extracted. We don't have any business rule violations, and it can flow directly into document management for the next steps, which are geocoding, approval, and later export to Sage 300. So as we are done with the non-PO invoice, let's send this batch to DMS and look how the process of the PO-based invoices looks like. So to do that, I need to hit send the batch right there on the top of the screen, just right there. Or if you like myself, you prefer hotkeys, you can click Ctrl+E. Now, batch leaves the station. We are back to the common queue of documents that are waiting, and this is the very top on the list, and then that's the batch 243, which is a PO invoice that we submitted earlier. Now, a couple of things are going to obviously change. Of course, as this is a PO invoice, we are going to extract the line item details, as you can see. And what happened there? If you look at the bottom left, now we have a bunch of warning messages indicating that something indeed went wrong. And we have a lot of business rule violations associated with a three-way match. So let's address that. Users in the interface, when they receive exception cases, they need to make two steps. They need to take the document through the two steps in the process. The very first one is going to be a character verification, and then rule validation. We do that in that sequence because some of the rule violations might be related to characters not being properly recognized due to the quality of the image, for example. So let's initiate character verification process. I will hit character verification wizard, or again, as you know, hotkeys are available in the process. You can hit F7, and in the pop-up window, we have a couple of things that the users can do to verify questionable characters that the optical character recognition engine was not sure on the level of the enforced threshold. So on the very top, we have a snippet of the image, and we have extracted data. So users can easily see what is on the image itself and what they need to verify or validate. If it is confirmed, they need to simply click confirm or enter from the keyboard, and system takes them in this manner through any questionable characters in the list. Enforced confidence level is configurable and depends on additional business rules that are running. Some of the characters will be confirmed automatically. For example, if the rule is true, if let's say subtotal plus tax plus freight equals total, all questionable characters in the fields that participate in that rule validation will be automatically confirmed. Now, we looked at the questionable characters, but we still have business rule violations. Now, let's initiate rule validation wizard, and we're taken to the very first thing that indicates that the PO number is not completely correct, and we can see why, because we need to put the PO at the very top and hit execute the rule again. Now, when we executed the rule, all business rules have been checked because now the PO exists and we can validate the line item details. What else does the system do? We can compare documents, the line details based on quantities and prices to both PO table and delivery receipt table. And this is why, kind of going back to the beginning of our presentation, why we started from onboarding of the PO and onboarding of the package slip, so we can actively perform lookups into the environment. So to demonstrate that, let's break a couple of the rules. I will take the very first item and change the quantity to, for example, 29. A couple of things happen. First of all, we have an arithmetical error. right? Because no longer quantity times price equals total, right? But also we have a three-way match error right now. So both of them on the bottom right there, you can see. And the three-way match, if we click on the information button, will indicate for us what kind of error occurred. And this is again direct lookup into the database. We see that we indicated for that specific item, which is highlighted in the table details, that we ordered 30 items, but we actually received 29, right? And this is an example of partial deliveries, for example, when you have discrepancies between databases. Very similar logic is applied to prices. So for example, let me change this to 30, back to 30, and let's change this price to, I don't know, let's put something outrageous like $50. Now, same idea as the very first violation. We have the discrepancy of the arithmetical rule, but in another level, we have a discrepancy because the rule now checks against the price in the database and clearly indicates for us that it is not what we have in the database, but moreover, it's above allowed deviation. This means that for lookups like that, for your three-way match or other lookups, you can say it is okay to have percentage or actual value deviation between the prices indicated. It's allowed 10%, 5%, 1%, 50 cents, $1, whatever you allow, or perhaps you do not allow any deviation at all. You totally control that. So this example, again, we have an instance when an image and the details of that are clearly indicating for us that no, this is not correct and we need to take action. And it goes without saying that with errors and warning messages, you will not be able to send the batch. Okay, so let's get this fixed. I will point and click on the value back on the image. And now this one is also ready to be sent. So I'm going to send the batch. And now let's look at the workflow and how we can see documents side by side, search and retrieve them, and perform other things in DocLink Document Management. So I'm going to send the batch, and we're going to look at the interface, which will be in the web client for convenience of the users and any platform and anywhere with a zero footprint. So I'm going to go ahead and let me refresh the screen so we can go ahead and I think I need to log in here back to the system. And we're going to go ahead and look at the workflow. So for example, this is currently, if we look at the system tab, this is the workflow, and we're looking at all accounts payable invoices that aren't processed and came from the OCR engine. So it means that they came from the recognition. And on the bottom right here, we actually have our purchase order associated invoice that is located there. So if we look at the document, for example, if I click on the icon, we can view and quickly browse the image of this invoice. And if necessary, we can also see support and documentation. So now, if I click on the invoice right here, right there, we can see all documents associated with this transaction. So we have a purchase order, packing slip, and the invoice. And we can actually see this document side by side if necessary. So for instance, if I would choose to open this AP invoice, and to do that, I will click open right there on the top, right here. So we'll click open to open that specific transaction in the workflow. I will be able to see supporting documents in, for example, vertical tile window application. So I'll select the vertical tile and we'll click show me the supporting documentation. So now, as you can see, we have side-by-side presentation of invoice, purchase order, and the packing slip, everything at once, right? So if any additional checks are required, if somebody, after even the system, as you've seen, verified and validated the matching rules, if you need to see documents side by side before you finally say the final approval for payment, for example, if there was no pre-approval, absolutely you can do that. You can compare documents side by side before final sign-off is done for that document set. And again, goes without saying, this is a purchase order example with only one packing slip and one invoice. You probably guessed that, let's say if you would have 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of documents for one purchase order, all of them would have been available in such a way to view and browse and compare them at the same time. Now, let's get back to a document, which is in our case is going to be our unprocessed non-PO invoice that we need to take through the process of review, coding, and approval before we can export the data to Sage. So I will initiate the search to find document that we processed earlier today, and I am interested in latest invoices. Let's sort them by date. So let's put them on the very top of the list. And on the very top, as you can see right there, we have a hard batteries invoice that we processed earlier today in the system. And let's open it and see how we can assign the GL account allocations and send document through the approval cycle. So let's select that one and hit open. By the way, when documents are received, if you would like the, let's say, accounts payable can receive a notification that there is a document that they need to look at before they can send it for approval. For example, they'll get notifications about that, and we'll have a look at that in just a moment. So a couple of things we need to do here. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and go to menu and hit create. So by doing that, we will initiate creation of a distribution stamp. In instances of recurring purchases, you can use a template which will allow you to apply the preset configuration of the GL distribution to any vendor that you know has recurring purchases all the time, and you don't want to spend time assigning the distribution manually. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit create this manually because I want to demonstrate you this process, and a couple of things happen. First of all, we have the header information assigned for us right here. So we have the details provided, and then as you probably guessed, this information came from the optical character recognition engine. And if we go to the detail line, now we can actually add the line items here. So a couple of things I would like you to notice. First of all, we have the differences right now. So we have the tax allocated already right here. And the differences is related to freights, potentially maybe there's freight, maybe not, and the subtotal of the invoice. So let's code this invoice and send it for approval. I will hit add, and by default, as soon as we add the item, it defaults to a default GL account for a vendor that is associated, that we already identified. So for hard batteries, the default account is purchases for inventory. And what we need to do here, if we scroll on the bottom, right there, we know that the total, the amounts for the inventory that we purchased in this invoice is $15,475. That's the totals for us. As soon as I do that, what I would like to point is that differences changes right there. So we have the remaining balance. And it is clear that this is the remaining balance for the shipping of that invoice, for the shipping of goods associated with that invoice. Now, I'm going to hit add and add the second line. So with adding of the second line, what I would like to demonstrate is that we can, and we do, conduct the lookups into the GL distribution and the existing general ledger accounts of Sage 300. And if we hit view, we can select and reassign this to a different GL. For example, it's going to be freight. Now hit OK. Assign that just like that. So we reassign this to a different distribution. And now we need to assign the final amounts right here. It's $77.38. And now our distribution is completed. So what we can do now, we can go ahead to go to menu, and we can burn and apply this distribution stamp. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit stamp. Typically, system would ask if you would like to apply the distribution, or you can disable the show button and just do it immediately as soon as you click stamp. When system stamps, a couple of things happen. We create the second page, which is basically our GL distribution. And it stays with the document forever, same as the information note. So this is another thing that will be created automatically. That's your audit trail for the system. So now let's quickly send it for the approval cycle, because we like to be mindful of time and also demonstrate the integration into another levels of integration into the ERP system. So based on the total amount, DocLink has already identified that everything above $15,000 is supposed to go to vice president. So it's easy for me. I can click simply send and click send to the vice president. And this is the person who is going to conduct the approval for this transaction. Now, as I mentioned, approvals and distributions are typically sent via email. So going back to our, well, that email has been received. the vendors, and if we need to receive a purchase order, for example, they would be received in the manner that you can see on the screen right now. When an email is sent with an attached purchase order, or maybe not only the purchase order, but also supporting documentation to a vendor informing that you are placing the purchase order with them. And this is going back to the action I was doing earlier in our demonstration when we created the purchase order in Sage and we clicked post and print. And two things happened at the same time. Order has been created in DocLink and posted there, created in Sage, and a copy was printed into DocLink, and we automatically, upon printing to DocLink, distributed the PO to a vendor. Now, when approvers are ready to approve, they will receive a notification to an email address, just like that, when we have an approval note. So if we select this email, a couple of things are here. So first of all, we have base data tokens about this invoice. We have the vendor, invoice number, totals, dates, things like that. But in addition to that, we have a copy of the invoice and the distribution stamp. So this means that anyone who is conducting an approval and they just need to approve, they can look at this information that is provided to them and simply approve with a note, deny with a note, and send the document to the next step in the process. And it goes without saying that obviously you can do this from your mobile device. So very simply hit approve and you don't need to open any additional interface and you'll be done. So let's do that. I will hit approve. In this example, I'm approving without a note and I send the document to approved for payment status. If you don't need to rush this document, if you approved it and that's all you need to do, this document is done. It is going to be, and it is placed in the approved for payment status, and all documents in that status are going to be batched together and exported to Sage on schedule. So every day, every 4 hours, every week, whatever schedule they're going to preset, that's done automatically. With PO and non-PO invoices, same thing. Nevertheless, there are instances in the process when you may need to rush something. Maybe we have an invoice that is overdue and we need to pay it immediately, like we need to pay it today. So how can we do that? So let me demonstrate you that on an example of the document that we have just designated as approved for payment. I'm going to go ahead and open another screen in Sage, which is going to be invoice entry screen. And this is where we're going to push the transaction manually. So I'm going to launch again the integration. As you can see, we're launching the ability to send the documents directly. And if you already have a batch where you would like to send document, that's fine. But I'm going to create a new batch. I will click plus to create a new batch. It's the batch 63. And we're going to open our smart client, our integration to see documents side by side. So I will show the list of documents that are pending approval. So basically, not the pending approval, that are approved for payment. And let's sort them by date. And it's actually at the very top of the list right here. So this is our invoice from today that we approved for payment. So all I need to do is open this document, the one that I would like to export. As you can see, we have all data ready. If we open our distribution availability right here, so just 1 second. Okay, so, and here I have a button to import right there. That's simple. So we know the batch number, it's going to be 63. I hit import. The pop-up will specify which batch I would like to put the documents to, batch 63, and presto, I hit OK, and the distribution stamp has been imported, transaction is completed. So let's fold this and look at the results. So now I can just click show me the last at the very top right here on the top of the screen. Just show me the last transaction, easy like that. And we have distribution stamp and the details about this invoice pushed automatically from DocLink to Sage. Very simple. Again, this is the manual import that you would conduct, and it goes without saying that, let's say we close this. And for example, 3 months later, you'd like to view documents. Same with the purchase order, you can hit view documents button and you'll be taken to documents associated with the transaction. So hit view documents and presto, we are back and we have audit trail available for us. We know who approved it, we know the geolocations, and we know everything about this document. And this information will stay with the document forever. So two-way integration and no double entry in this process, as you've seen during our today's demonstration. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, and I will turn this over back to Kurt for some closing notes.
Thank you, Igor. Let's see. I think I've seen the wrong slide here. Sorry for the technical difficulty, folks. Let me do this. And then can everyone see my slide? Igor, do you see the correct slide now?
You're showing it from your, you're showing the slide from the viewer perspective. So I see the editor, the slideshow.
Okay.
You need to switch to this one, yeah.
Sorry.
If you can pass me a control back, I can show the slides for you if you would like.
Yeah.
Just pass the control back to me, and I already have it ready for you.
There you go. All right. Sorry about that. I'm having some mouse issues for some reason. So where I wanted to leave off was customer success. So I think oftentimes what happens, we get pegged as being a little bit of an expensive product, and some people will automatically rule us out. So what I wanted to do is just talk about a couple scenarios where customers have actually see the ROI and they use our product to gain that money savings, right? So in this case, I wanted to talk about one of our customers is Tyler Technologies. They develop software for government entities. And we found out during our sales cycle that they were spending a lot of money on ACH remittances because they were mailing them between different locations. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to say, hey, look, we can eliminate that postage and be able to eliminate and ultimately save you about $11,000 annually a year. So when we did that, here was their challenge that was presented at the top, right? Those ACHs were a lot of money, right? And so they had too much paper, and so they were able to build upon that and be able to ideally get rid of those ACHs. And at the end result, they were able to save about $11,000 annually, right? So that is a considerable amount of money because that money was only going to grow. That annual savings they got was big for them, and the reason why they moved forward with a document management solution like DocLink. So there's going to be some small things in there in your organization that might not be postage, but it might just be storage, things like that, where ROI justifies the price of DocLink. So if we go to the next use case here, Igor. Compliance is another big one. And so with compliance, we see, audits, we see people having to pay for that because they can't come up with the documentations that the auditor needs to review. So what they'll do is they'll get paid, they'll have to pay fines or have to pay penalties. And so what we want to do is, because all that information is housed in DocLink, as we showed through the demonstration, as I showed through the overview at the beginning, is we can actually allow the auditor to access the documents that pertain to their audit, or we could create some sophisticated reports for them, right? But the idea here is because we have all that information at our fingertips, right, in the repository, we can easily produce that for an auditor to avoid fines, right? So we had a customer, Aurora Publishing. They have an entity in the US and they have one in Ireland, actually. And they were, between the two organizations, they were getting fined somewhere up to $250,000. And they got that in back-to-back years. And they came to us and they said, can you produce documents in a timely manner? If so, how can you do it? And we simply were able to just show them the repository, how they can access those documents, how they can capture those documents and produce those documents in a matter of moments, and they immediately went forward with the project, right? So again, this is just another use case on how you can utilize DocLink to save money, gain the ROI at the end result, get those wins as we talked about. So there's other areas that we can impact your organization, as DocLink is an enterprise-wide business solution, right? I know we've heavily focused on AP today, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, it's low-hanging fruit for us. It makes a lot of sense for a lot of people, and there's a lot of ROI built into that. But as customers have begun using our product, they quickly have been following up with us when we do our check-ins to see how things are going, and they say, hey, we're using DocLink for AP, but can we use it for HR, right? Absolutely. You can use it for HR. Field service is a big one. Work orders for those remote employees that are out in the middle of the field, right? They can use a tablet, they can use their mobile device or the web client to access work orders, fill those work orders in, and automatically send those into the organization, right? Now there's no time lapse, right? They don't fill those work orders out on a piece of paper and they get stuck in between the seats, and when they get into the organization, they hand over something that's all maybe greasy, marked up, coffee stains, etc. Right? We can eliminate that right at the beginning, and that time lapse that takes place as well. We do contract management well, quote to check scenarios, right? So sales order scenarios, right? We can do that all very well. Basically, any paper process you have today, we can get rid of that, and we can digitize that and bring that into DocLink, right? Expense reports is another one, and I kind of touched on that. So again, we can expand DocLink very well. It is, again, enterprise-wide solution. And to go along with that is, why DocLink? World-class products, rapid implementation, outstanding customer support, of course, are going to be the forefront. But we want to make sure customers are happy, right? We want to make sure they're gaining those wins. They're having success using the product, because at the end of the day, the customer is what supports our business and, supports us moving forward as an organization. We've been around for over 30 years, and we've been doing this for a long time. So I think our product has spoken for itself in the channel. So that is one thing we pride ourselves on. So I know we're not all playing for an NBA championship, just to kind of come full circle here and wrap things up. But what we want to do is we want to create those wins within the organization and make things a little bit easier, get away from the monotonous day-to-day paper pushing and things like that. We want to, show that we are successful. And Igor, you can go to the next slide. And we want to show that, we are here for you. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us directly, or you can reach out to your BAASS representative. I do want to apologize for the technical glitch I did have at the beginning and in the middle of the presentation. It does happen. We're not perfect, but I do want to thank everybody for your time, and I look forward to hopefully speaking with you guys soon. We did have some time left here to address some questions. I don't know if those have came through. If not, we can address those individually after the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. So we do have a few questions. The first one asks, when the batch is sent, does it mean that the PO is received at that point?
Yeah, so whenever, sorry, Igor, were you going to answer that?
No, go ahead, Kurt. It's okay.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. So when the batch is sent, yeah, everything's been completed, everything's good. So now it goes into Sage. So that would be correct. It's been received, everything looks good, everything's matched, everything's good to go.
And what if the PO info is not exactly the same as the info listed on the invoice?
So what will happen is there would be a discrepancy. So if Igor showed it at the beginning, if there is any discrepancies and it doesn't match accurately, you would get put into a queue where you would have an individual, whoever created that purchase order, will say, we'll go in there, and they would have the opportunity to address why that discrepancy is there, right? Whether it was short shipped or the numbers don't add up. and they could reach out to that vendor and resolve the issue before it gets pushed into the batch. Yes.
How many documents can you attach to an invoice?
As many as you like. So as many invoices or documents can be attached. In terms of OCR, OCR will consider one document up to 4 pages, and then after that, it'll be considered the next document. But you can attach as many documents as you like until your heart is full.
Okay, great. One individual asked, they have standing POs which allow periodic invoicing, such as service contract invoice on a quarterly basis. How does this process impact the standing PO?
So what we would want to do is it would just essentially be a blanket type PO scenario. So we could leave that open until it's been completed and then pass that through. So we would just open a separate batch. And then that way we can handle that as those one-offs come off, and it leaves that open longer. There are some other ways we can do that as well, but that would be a traditional way of doing it.
Okay, perfect. And then the last question is, how can you obtain DocLink? Is it on-premise, cloud-hosted, or subscription?
So that's a great question. Today it is going to be on-premise or hosted by a third-party provider. It could be a perpetual license purchase, or it could be a subscription license purchase.
Okay, wonderful. So thanks again. And for any additional information, please reach out to your BAASS account manager. And I believe, the DocLink contact information is on the slide right now. So thanks again, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.